Warning. Warning. The following video contains mature content not suitable for children or the easily offended. Please keep this in mind when watching. Thank you and please enjoy.
Code Vein was an action RPG Souls-like game developed and published by Bandai Namco. The game garnered interest back in 2017 and subsequent trailers and gameplay reveals earned it the moniker of Anime Souls. With the dev team rocking talent from the God Eater team, there was definitely eyes on what they could bring to the table to make it more than just another Souls clone. The team's main goal was to create a new IP that was unique but also still fit in with their God Eater franchise. While the game was initially scheduled to release in September of 2018, it was delayed until 2019 due to the team wanting to refine the gameplay after feedback from demos at E3 and Anime Expo. 1 year later, on September 27th, 2019, the game released on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC to mixed reviews. And to give a quick summary of what all the reviews said, the game was decent but nothing too spectacular.
So basically the game was very mid.
Yeah, mid sounds about right. I picked up the game on release, and while I did quite enjoy my time with it, even ranking it number 4 in my top games of 2019, I can acknowledge that the game is quite marred by issues that make it seem like it'll only be remembered as that Anime Souls game made by the God Eater people. But what the heck was Code Vein?
Hello. How are you feeling? Stay back!
Code Vein's story, to be quite blunt, is not memorable at all and full of tropes and complicated fluff. I kind of only realized this when I came back to the game to record for this video and was like, oh, I don't remember anything that actually happened. Starting the game off with the amnesia angle definitely limited what they could do, and honestly I would have liked to have seen what they were originally going to do with the intro. There's an unused cutscene that presumably was going to be in the memories of the player section, with said section being at the beginning of the game instead of shoehorned in the middle, and that may have worked out better if they stuck with that idea. Show us the stakes and what the player's involvement in the story is, even if they don't tell us everything right at the start. It's better than another story of the amnesiac blankly staring at everyone waiting to be told that they're the chosen one. There'd still be enough mysteries to keep the intrigue high while giving us a better glimpse at a major threat. Things like the player's broken blood code and why Jack is stabbing weird-shaped objects into Ava's chest are enough to make me think, things are getting kinda funky and I'm invested. The characters are a weird mixed bag of interesting tragic backstories but then very safe and basic personalities. Louis was friends with Cruz before she went kinda bonkers from being experimented on and causing a bit of a fuss.
Triple kill.
Now he wants to find a way to make enough blood beads so all the revenants have enough without needing donations from the humans. He's cool, calm and collected until he isn't, and he does grow on you since you spend the most time with him, but never really goes beyond just fine. Yakumo was turned into a revenant by Mido, one of his friends was turned to Ash protecting him, and the other was made into a successor to keep them safe. Yet his entire character can be described as the cheerful guy with the big sword. Oh, sorry, he also loves onigiri and he used to make them for his friends back when they were mercs, and the game will make sure you know that.
These donuts are great! Jelly-filled are my favorite!
Mia is a bit more fleshed out with her relationship with Nicola and their connection with Jack, but her personality is the very overdone hard-ass girl character with a soft side. She also gets the tragic backstory treatment of my parents died, so now I have to grow up and take care of my little brother, who then sacrifices himself to protect me, which at least is a unique flavor of that certain trope.
It seems like you don't really like the characters that much.
Yeah, but honestly I think they're fine. Just nothing special. They don't seem to grow past their initial bullet point disposition.
Well, there's still a few more to go over.
Okay, so Jack is well connected to your backstory and is a successor, but once he actually joins your side, he takes a big backseat to the main plot just to kinda exist. I would actually have liked to have seen him sacrifice himself at one point. Yeah, it might have been a bit more cliche, but it would have been more interesting than him just standing around spouting the occasional line by endgame. And then Ava is nothing but a plot device, and that's it. Like, actually, Ava is super forgettable to the point that if you don't revive her after her boss fight, the story can still go on without her.
But she's in love with Jack and she has the special ability to soothe the successors with her voice.
I know, but she along with Jack would have been much better off being just in their own sections of the game, because once all that's over, they both fall off hard from actually being relevant. The initial three feel like they have much bigger stakes in the story. Now, Io is a much better side character in my eyes. The fact that they don't explain why she lost her memories and focus on her development was a breath of fresh air, weirdly enough. Seeing the other attendants and even having to fight one, thinking that Io could have just been another mindless puppet, but instead she grows and learns to make her own path while fighting at the player's side. It's nice she's much more fleshed out and interesting despite being the epitome of apathy. Gold star for you. Now, the world building is its own can of blood-covered worms, as it certainly exists, if someone telling you the world is counts. Humans are introduced about as well as a bulldozer introduces itself to your bedroom and just as welcome. Do you mind? Why bother talking about the humans if it's relegated to one lady who you save and she tells you about the human camps, she shows up to give you items she says are from the human camps, and then that's it. Basically, it's a completely pointless part of the story that wouldn't have changed anything if it wasn't there. They do talk about how Silver has a bunch of humans captive and that the government provides shelter to humans in exchange for donating blood, but it's all tell and no show besides this lady. Also, the reveal about the monsters hiding behind the red mist is okay, but the fact that it's one of the monsters from God Eater makes me think they're a little too attached to their original IP. I do really like the memory sequences from gathering the vestiges. They give some good backstory to a lot of the characters, especially the successors. Then there's the terminology, because vampires and ghouls were too normal. Okay, well, I'll give them credit that Revenant does actually fit better since they were artificially created after death, so it fits the description, but when they go feral they're called the Lost, which feels like they only did that so they could use this line.
Once someone is lost, they can never come back.
The last point I'll touch on is the endings. First is Heirs, the bad ending, and it lives up to that name. If you don't restore any of the memories of any of the successors, then your player character takes in all the relics, gets overtaken by the Queen's power, and then Louis stabs you in the back. No one gets what they want, and it's kind of a downer. To Eternity is the neutral ending, and I had to look it up because I've never actually gotten it before, and from what I gathered, you take some of the relic's powers, fall into a coma, and Io stays by your side and turns to stone. Or ash. Whatever, this ending's crappy and you get it by only restoring some of the memories. Dweller in the Dark is the true and ultimately much more satisfying ending, restoring all the memories to save the successors. With Io taking on all the relics, producing enough blood beads for all, and keeping the red mist up to protect everyone, it's a much better, if bittersweet, outcome.
Don't forget, if you restore the Eos vestige, you also get the extra scene.
That's right, the extra scene that shows you and your friends braving the outer side of the mist and even hints at Io still being alive. Considering Io is one of the more interesting characters, I do like how they utilized her growth in this ending and showing her love for the MC. The other good point is that this ending is both a setup for a sequel, but also a good ending to this chapter of the group's story. I think the best thing going forward if they ever do a sequel is to look more at refining the story before trying to expand upon it. A sentiment that I'll bring up a few more times as the video goes on. If the story was the slightly underwhelming crust of this pie, then the gameplay is the really nice filling that maybe isn't as good as some other pies, but still satisfying.
What kind of weird allegory is that?
Sorry, that's what happens when I ride on an empty stomach. Now, quick note. For the footage I played on a New Game Plus save, so if you're wondering why I'm plowing through everything, it's because of that, but I'll be talking mainly from my first playthrough. The game uses a stamina system that drains when you attack, evade, and defend, as well as having enemies that can chunk your health just by looking at you funny, so standard Souls-like affair. The main gimmick is the blood codes. Each blood code gives you different stats and are suited to different styles of play. Each code also gives you access to gifts, which are various active and passive skills that range from casting powerful spells to super flashy sword moves. I'm very happy that if you master a gift you can use it with other blood codes because it makes the system much more customizable. It's pretty viable to have multiple builds on one character since you can switch blood codes easily. You gain more blood codes as you progress through the story, as well as when you restore the various vestiges you find, and it's very much recommended both for story reasons as well as getting the much more powerful gifts. This system is the best best part of the gameplay, and while some of the blood codes seem a lot more situational, the frick? You'll gravitate towards the ones that suit your playstyle, and it's really enjoyable. The game kinda overloads you with weapons. I lost count of how many I found just in one playthrough. I decided to try a new build while recording the footage and found the swords to be quite fun to use as well, or that might be because I had really strong weapons. The biggest issue with the various builds more comes down to how useful they are for bosses. A caster build makes slow bosses a breeze, but the ones who don't even give you enough time to blink before shoving a lance in your gut can be infuriating. Blood veils are the other part of your build, but these feel a bit underutilized besides giving you different stats and different animations for your parry and drain attacks. They also give you way too many of these things, but once you get the best ones, the rest might as well be scraps. The upgrade system is fine. Adding another number to your weapon just requires haze and increasingly rare types of metals, all preceded by the word queen. Adding a small amount of elemental damage or status effects by getting special materials feels redundant because half the time you end up losing more stats than what you gain. The partner characters are an interesting addition. I heard they sort of work like a difficulty setting. Depending on who you bring, they'll make the game easier or harder, or you can go solo for a better challenge. Honestly though, I don't see how this works. Yes, Io can heal you a lot more, but she also dies super quickly. Yakumo has always been my favorite. He hits hard, takes damage, and loves to make enemies flinch when I'm trying to get a parry off. I do like having them around though, especially if you don't want to play online multiplayer, because lag becomes the biggest enemy. Having another body to draw aggro can help during boss fights, but they do have a bad habit of just standing there while the boss crushes them into blood jam. The level design is where things start to fall apart pretty hard. Each area has its own theme, like Ruined City, Swamp, Icy Mountain, and I'm Lost. Some areas are pretty straightforward with only a few divergent paths. Some are much more maze-like, and some are slogs through really obnoxious, dangerous terrain that ruins the pacing. The city on fire that constantly damages you isn't challenging, it's just irritating and wastes time. This is nothing compared to the sand that drains your ichor. Why did they think this was a good idea? You're basically taking away what makes the gameplay fun and unique. I loathe playing through this area. I kind of wish they just stuck to more sprawly areas with secret paths. That's a lot more enjoyable to explore.
I need to add that having hidden instant death drops is a cheap way to add challenge, but the devs must have really loved this cause they're everywhere.
The standard enemies are pretty varied and the big ones are very threatening, but after a while they're nothing more than hazards. However, the invasion areas are just used to inflate the difficulty. It's not fun having to wade through waves of enemies in really awkward spaces. Now for the boss fights, the main draw of these types of games and the thing that sustains those ranking channels.
Ahem.
Touché. The bosses are mostly pretty fun, challenging, and a good test of skills. Oliver as a first boss is a good starting point. It wants you to make use of all the skills you've acquired while not completely ruining your time. The same can't be said about the Butterfly of Delirium. This thing is fast, hits like a truck, and has poison on top of that. It's such a lurch in difficulty from everything else you've been fighting so far, it took me ages to beat it in my first playthrough. The Insatiable Despot is pretty forgettable. It's just a big boss that is very easy to dodge and also doesn't do enough damage to really be a threat. The Invading Executioner is that one boss they pushed hard during the marketing, and I can't put my finger on why. Anyway, Creepy Stripper Miku is a tough fight that can wreck you pretty fast, but it's the highlight of this obnoxiously terrible level. Argent Wolf Berserker seems like a tough fight until you realize you can launch and parry him, which I failed miserably to do in the footage. Now the Queen's Knight is one of my favorites. It's challenging, but you can learn the patterns and plan your strategy. He doesn't have anything that feels cheap, and while some of his flashy moves seem impossible to read, you just need to be patient and wait for an opening. Successor of the Ribcage is one of the few range-focused bosses, but she has a pretty bad blind spot that's easy to exploit and works on both phases of her fight. I guess special prize for being one of the few two-phase fights. Successor of the Breath is slow, hits hard, but nothing particularly special or stand out. The Gilded Hunter sucks. He's so cheap. He attacks way too fast, and the breaks between his attacks isn't even enough to cast one spell without getting slapped across the face with a lance you didn't see coming. I hate this fight, we're moving on. Successor of the Claw is a fight that looks like it'll be tough, especially with how fast she moves, but she's very easy to read and dodge, and even if she does manage to hit you, she really doesn't do a lot of damage. You can't just quickly heal up. The Blade Bearer and Cannoneer are the Ornstein and Smoke that I think all Souls-like games seem contractually obligated to have. I remember this fight being the only one where I had to change my build to actually beat. They do complement each other, and the fight is definitely made easier with an AI partner to split the aggro, but getting past these two feels feels like an achievement since you really need to pay attention to both of them. Taking out the Blade Bearer first is probably the best course of action since the Cannoneer is a lot slower and easier to dodge. Successor of the Throat is a weirdly easy fight, but she does have one move that can be an instant kill, but she's very predictable for the most part. Juzo Mido is a fight that seems easy until he decides he's bored and kills you when he has a sliver of health left. He has some pretty cheap moves that are really hard to dodge and he just hits so hard. Queen's Knight Reborn is the Queen's Knight with more moves and hits harder, so still a fun fight if a bit samey. Attendant of the Relics is a good fight from a story perspective, but a joke as an actual fight. The Skull King is my other favorite boss. He's a great challenge that tests you, but he's not cheap. He gets much harder the more health he loses, but you can always find a way to dodge or block his moves. It's a fight that if you lose, it's because you made a mistake, not because the boss decided to turn on cheat mode. The final boss, the Virgin Born. I don't like this fight. It's just too big for its own good.
What kind of complaint is that?
Well, when my strategy devolved into standing underneath it and swinging away, cause trying to use spells will get me killed by one of its many cheat moves, it feels really underwhelming. It doesn't feel like a test of skill, it's a slog with a boss that has way too many one-shot moves. I honestly would have preferred the Skull King as the final boss. Overall, the gameplay is fun, but...
Wait, aren't you forgetting about the depths?
Oh yeah, the depths are a complete waste of time. They're boring to explore and all the bosses are just palette swaps of the main game's bosses. A complaint that is echoed in another part of the game that has 3 letters and something I'll touch on later. There are the challenge towers, but they're just fights with really tough enemies and the same palette swap bosses. If you've been watching and sitting there wondering about the character creator, what is arguably the biggest selling point of the game, it's good. It's very deep with an insane amount of detail and accessories as long as you don't mind the lack of body types and clothing, but I think it serves its purpose well. The game is fun to play and it's the highlight of the whole package, but I feel like there's some weird disconnect with some of the boss fights not fitting in well with the system in place.
You're always standing around and protecting me. I don't need you to do that, you know.
You might be tired of hearing me say the same thing, but the visuals are a mixed bag of interesting ideas with poor execution. Looking at the behind the scenes, the team's goal was to create a photorealistic world to appeal to a Western audience while still having the anime style for the characters that was popular in Japan. And I mean, they certainly did do that, but to what effect? Well, firstly, I need to say Kurumi Kobayashi, the character designer for the game, did an outstanding job on the Revenants. They all look like badasses living in a dangerous world, and they each have their own distinctive style. The closest comparison to these characters is the God Eater cast, but I much prefer Code Veins because while each character is distinct, there's much more cohesion between the designs. They said they were aiming for a kind of gangster look, and I think they achieved that, especially when you look at Louis and Jack. And yeah, I know some of the female characters have some questionable clothing choices, but I mean, the world's ended and you're theoretically going to live forever, you might as well wear what you want. Who am I kidding? We all know why they did this, it's why you can look at all of them in nothing but a towel in the hot spring. Although you can also perv on all the guys, so at least Bandai were equal opportunists when they went full horny on main. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. While I did find the Blood Veils a bit underutilized, I still think their designs are quite cool. They fit in well with the rest of the character designs and the transformations are pretty sick. They did an excellent job in showing off that the Revenants were created with technology as opposed to the typical fantasy and magic you would usually associate with these sorts of characters. The masks are really well thought out and serve as a good mix of the vampire aspects and the post-apocalyptic elements. Enemies and bosses also have some pretty unique designs. Some look grotesque and wield crude weapons, giving them a deranged, almost psychotic feel, while some are much more elegant and ornate in their design. Despite how different the designs can be, they all feel like they belong in this game with these characters. The weapons are also really cool and show off much more of the post-apocalyptic side of the game. On the flip side, we have the world design, which for the most part is also really well done. I can see the Apocalypse movie inspirations, especially in the Ruined City and Crown of Sand, despite my grievances with that particular area. The home base is really cool with that ragtag hideout vibe. Places like the Ridge of Frozen Souls and City of Falling Flame are fine even if it feels more like I'm jumping through Mario levels as opposed to exploring a grand world. Then there's the drab of drab. Howling Pit is just grey on grey on grey. The Ashen Cavern is extremely boring to navigate and the only part that looks somewhat nice is the boss room. But of course nothing compares to the Cathedral of Sacred Blood, aka Help Me I'm Lost, and Crypt Spire, aka Help Me I'm Lost Too, haven't we already been this way? These areas are are trash. Not only from a gameplay perspective because of how nonsensical the layout is and having really obnoxiously hidden paths, but they're just so ugly to look at. It's like they put the level together, got the fill bucket with white and went, yeah, that'll do, I guess. Besides certain levels, the detail in these areas are really thorough and serve well at showing off a ruined world. They can be incredibly well made and shows off the team's talents well in both their character and world design.
I feel like there is a big but waiting to happen.
But
I knew it.
while separately I think they did a really good job, they don't always mix very well with each other. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it never works, because it certainly does in some places. The Provincial Government Center and the Jail of Stagnant Blood are my favorite looking levels, as they go for a much more dark and gothic style, which fits much better with these character designs. When you're going through an area like the Outskirts that looks more like a Call of Battlefield map, things kinda start to fall apart. A lot of what I've said so far does more so come down to your personal tastes. If you don't like anime styled games, then you probably won't like the characters as much as I do. Putting the aesthetics aside, however, my biggest problem with the game comes at a more technical level. First off, the slowdown when traveling through levels is terrible. If you're going to make us go through this so you can load the next level, just put a freaking loading screen. We're already used to how slow they are, this just makes the game look cheap. Secondly, the clipping. It's bad. Like, super distracting, and I can't believe they left it like that. Everyone's hair and clothes are just incorporeal. It's unreal how they let this get through. And finally, the texture pop-ins. This is just plain horrible. I would lose count at how many times the textures would pop in for the characters during the same cutscene. I don't know what could have happened to let this be the quality of the final product. I did some research and found that Code Vein was made on Unreal, while the God Eater games were supposedly made on an in-house engine, and I have to ask why the change when graphically God Eater 3 and Code Vein aren't that much different from each other. God Eater still has terrible clipping issues, but there's no lag and no texture popping. I understand they may have wanted something more powerful to make the bigger levels, but if they couldn't get the textures to stay put after every camera cut, then I don't think it was worth it. Okay, well, I've been bashing the game for quite a while now, so let's get into something much more positive and talk about the sound and music. The sound effects are visceral and have just the right amount of punch to them. Enemy grunts and laughs are somewhat unnerving, especially when you hear them from off-screen, and the weighty steps of the larger enemies make them an imposing threat. I also really like the sound of the spells. I know it's a weird thing, but they just work well without overshadowing everything else that's going on in a fight. The English voice acting is pretty good. The main cast all do well in their roles, which is probably helped by the fact that most of the time the characters wear masks, so no lip matching. Max Middleman was probably the standout for me. He does an excellent job as Louis.
For real?
Now the soundtrack is a beast of its own for just how good it is. Go Shiina was the composer for the OST, and he's worked on many other titles including the God Eater franchise, as well as Tekken, the Idolmaster franchise, and even the Demon Slayer anime. The behind the scenes explained that he was shown a lot of the game and told to write what he thought would fit each scenario, and it worked out really well. Considering the big emphasis on boss fights, he managed to make tracks that make you feel just how monumental the task ahead would be. The orchestral pieces that flood the game are simply astounding and work incredibly well at building up the hype.
I do quite like how he also added in some very unique songs as well that you wouldn't think would fit in this type of game.
Exactly. In songs like Humanity, you get this much more uplifting and hopeful song, and Amber Light has a much more soulful sound to it. I really don't have any issues with the soundtrack. I think the major takeaway from this segment is that the team definitely had their heads in the right place and had some ambitious ideas, but the execution fell flat. I initially wasn't planning on talking about this, but it's an important aspect of this game's life cycle, so here it is. If you've been following along with Code Vein after its initial release, then you know that the reception of the DLC has been pretty bad. I hadn't played any of the DLC before making this video, but I decided to try the first one to see what the fuss was about, and maybe I would actually like the DLC and decide to get the next. Lol, no, it was trash. It sucks. Bad. And I paid $15 for this. I feel ripped off. Here is a list of everything you get with the Hellfire Knight DLC.
1 new depths map, 1 unique boss fight, 3 new blood codes, 3 new blood veils, 4 new weapons, 2 outfits for Louis, 2 outfits for Io, 19 cosmetic items.
You might hear this and think, okay, it's not that bad. Well, let me ruin it all for you. The map is pretty boring. It looks okay, but it's just a bunch of pathways to find all the items. items. This is where you can fight 2 mini-bosses, but they are just reskinned and slightly souped up versions of the enemies from the main game. Also, it likes to just dump a horde of enemies on you because that's the only way they can make challenge apparently. It is good though that it's a tougher area. I mean, even being at level 170, I was still getting smashed to pieces easily by the normal enemies. The boss fight is what's supposed to be the main draw, but besides the fact that I did no damage to it, my best attempt while recording I got him down to half. He's not very fun to fight. He just swings and pounces at you very fast and occasionally makes the ground explode. He does stupid damage. His attacks are just way too fast, which doesn't help when you're a caster, and he really doesn't feel like he was made to suit this type of game.
That's because he wasn't. It's just Hannibal from God Eater.
Oh well, that explains a lot. So really, he's not even that unique of a boss fight. Also, God Eater and Code Vein do not play the same. Anyway, moving on to the big FU the game throws at you. So all those weapons, blood veils, and cosmetics we mentioned, sounds cool, right? Well, they're all locked behind a really obnoxious challenge system. And before anyone spouts get good, I wouldn't mind this system. If I didn't pay 15 bucks for it, and nowhere do they say that majority of the content would be locked behind extra challenges. I wouldn't mind if some of the rewards were for beating the boss and exploring, but nearly everything is just in these challenges, and the challenges themselves are badly designed. Certain ones will make you have to completely change your build and playstyle just to unlock one thing. Not to mention that if you want everything, you'll have to fight the boss over and over again with all these different builds. And then it's not even worth it because the blood veils are just purple recolors of the one in the base game. The weapons are reskins with fire effects and changed stats, and the rest is just cosmetics besides the blood codes. The 3 new blood codes are probably the most interesting part, but only one of them can be acquired from exploring and beating the boss. One of them is locked behind the challenges, and the other you can only get part of it here, and the rest is in the other DLCs. I'm done talking about this, I'm sad now. If it wasn't obvious, I didn't get the other DLC because I could spend that money on literally anything else and it would have been a better investment. It's incredibly disappointing that this was how they wanted to keep the game going and that this was just all rushed out with zero care.
At least say something before you go. After all, we're supposed to be friends, right?
You have stored so many precious memories inside of my heart, and I promise I will never allow them to fade away.
So what's the takeaway from all this? First off, I know I've been harsh and I know that the team would have put a lot of effort into making this game. Making video games isn't an easy thing, and Code Vein had so much untapped potential to become something incredible. I still like the game for what it is, but know that in a couple of years it'll be forgotten. If by some chance a sequel does get made, I hope they look at the feedback and really try to make the game as good as I know it could be. Hone in on what works and rework the parts that don't. Unfortunately, from how the DLC was churned out, I wouldn't be surprised if we never see Code Vein again. But we can look forward to the future and hope the dev team learn from Code Vein in their future projects. Their next title, Scarlet Nexus, is looking to be a more Astral Chain-like game, and I'm pretty excited to see what they have in store. Just from the trailers, I'm liking the visuals a lot. I know it's all speculation on whether or not it's going to be good, but sometimes I like to be optimistic. And so ends this long video about the anime vampire Dark Souls game. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, subscribe if you would like to see more, and leave a comment on your thoughts on Code Vein. My views are just one of many. I hope you have an amazing day.